Let me tell you how an advertising bungle became a landmark law case. You might ask, how could an advertisement get you into so much trouble? Well, it can, and it did. So it went like this. Collect 60 tokens and you'd get a hat. That's cool. 400 tokens and you would get a denim jacket. Awesome. Collect 7 million tokens and be eligible for a brand new Harrier jump jet. Yeah, you heard me right. A Harrier jump jet. Who would collect that many tokens? But if you advertise this in a commercial and forget to say it's a joke in the small print, you're asking for trouble. Big mistake. Who would be so stupid? Pepsi. Yeah, the iconic brand and rival to cola. They did exactly that to launch their Pepsi Points scheme. But John Leonard came along, and that's when the trouble started. In 1996, PepsiCo, then known for creating the young, cool, carbonated drink of a generation, made an incredible mistake. Washington State Community College student John Leonard took advantage of the wildly popular Drink Pepsi, Get Stuff marketing campaign that gave consumers a way to earn Pepsi points from their purchases and then redeem those points for some super fashionable merchandise plastered with the Pepsi logo. Leonard was struck by the Pepsi TV ad that featured a slick young man who won himself a bunch of Pepsi gear, including a $32 million Harrier jet for only 7 million points. Without disclaimers or fine print, the only legal language Leonard found was within a clause in the Pepsi Stuff catalog that detailed the process for consumers to purchase Pepsi points for 10 cents a piece. Armed with 15 Pepsi points and a $700,000 check supplied by investor friend Todd Hoffman, Leonard sent the money and points to Pepsi, awaiting word on whether the company would come through on the alleged promise it had made on TV. And did he get his Harrier jet? The hell he did. The company sent back Leonard's check, offered him 2 coupons, and relayed that the commercial was meant to be a joke. Game over, right? Absolutely not. That's when the legal battle began. Leonard refused a settlement offer after Pepsi initially sued him. In the lead up to the court case, Michael Avenatti even made an appearance. Yes, that Michael Avenatti. Avenatti eventually left the legal team, and complex litigation attorney David Nachman was brought on board, saying, "Holding Pepsi to account really motivated me and my team to pursue this," Nachman said. The case was assigned to Judge Kimba Wood, who ultimately decided to grant the summary judgment in Pepsi's favor. Quote, "No objective person could reasonably have concluded that the commercial actually offered consumers a Harrier jet," she wrote in her opinion. "If it's clear that an offer was not serious, then no offer has been made." Nachman said of the decision, "There's no question in my mind Judge Wood thought she might have been writing for the law books," noting that it was a, quote, "rather lengthy opinion for a straightforward contracts case." As it turns out, she was. Leonard v. PepsiCo is now one of the most well-known contract law cases in America. It's a case study that easily captures the public imagination because it's relatable, said Dean Sudha Sethi of the City University of New York School of Law. Unlike a lot of cases in contracts that you read in law school, where it's 2 businesses fighting about a clause and a contract that's obscure or difficult to understand, Leonard v. PepsiCo is about an advertisement that was seen by millions of people. In fact, the case is often used to teach law students about mutual assessment and how the reasonable person standard influences if and when an advertisement can be considered an offer. What would a reasonable person think about this? Would they understand it to be a joke, or would they understand it to be a serious offer that is being made? Sethi asked. Law students sometimes debate whether Leonard's belief that he was accepting a valid offer was actually reasonable, or if he had reason to know that a serious offer hadn't been made. Quote, "I think that there's a distinction between someone who's relatively young but is reading the fine print and trying to get away with something as opposed to someone who goes out and buys a ton of Pepsi products with a group of friends and collects all of the points," unquote. Professor Matthew Charity of CUNY School of Law tells Tadam. "I think that the second person would have a better indication that they were not actually fooled by how the product was advertised in a way that Leonard was not." Now let me introduce Hoffman. the secret sauce of the whole crazed scheme. A charismatic millionaire, then in his 40s, who had befriended Leonard on a mountaineering trip, and when Leonard realized he needed $700,000 to force a fighter jet out of a fizzy drink company, Hoffman was the first person he turned to. To everyone's surprise, Hoffman was keen. John brought this to me and told me the story, he recalls. We looked at the videotape of the commercial, and I just kept looking at it over and over and going, that is absolutely a reckless ad to put out there by a major corporation that knows better. After that point, the game was afoot. Pepsi's defense throughout was that the ad was clearly a joke. At one point during the series, a Pepsi spokesperson mentions that while millions of people watched the advert, only one person actually tried to redeem the jet offer. It is possible no one else went as far as Leonard in their attempts to claim the prize, but he points out that he first heard of Pepsi points when a father at the Little League baseball team he coached mentioned that he was a part of a jet buying consortium. Leonard was unique in being the only viewer who had access to Hoffman, a like-minded renegade with the funds to back it up. Leonard describes Hoffman as, quote, the maths the Pepsi didn't do. They were counting on there being a ton of dreamers like me, but they just never figured a dreamer like me would ever have access to somebody that was willing to go on this crazy ride and actually would write the check. That one oversight now forms the basis for a widely entertaining Netflix series entitled Pepsi, Where's My Jet? It tells the story of Leonard over 4 episodes and recounts one young man's determination to take on a multinational corporation to get what an advertisement had promised him. John had this kind of Spielbergian quality about him when he was younger, where it was just like anything is possible. Renzi was initially offered Pepsi, Where's My Jet as a work of fiction, but after tracking down Leonard, by then in his mid-40s and working as a park ranger in Alaska, he realized that the truth would be more entertaining. Making the series, I always had this guiding post of everybody needs a John and everybody needs a Todd. And it's this relationship between two men of different generations who had a wild idea and saw it through that runs through the series like a golden cord. Even decades later, over Zoom, they're warm and familiar, crashing into each other's stories and finishing each other's sentences. I just love being connected with people like John. He looks all serious and he looks conservative, but he's insane. He's certifiably insane. He holds a job, he has a beautiful family, he has a house and pays a mortgage and goes to work every day, but he's got some real mental things going on, way outside the box. The climax of this story is easily Googleable, but the journey there is about as crazed as its genesis. At one point, Michael Avenatti, later to find infamy as the lawyer of Stormy Daniels, pops up to help the fight against Pepsi, sharing a hotel room with Leonard in what is described as a, quote, planes, trains, and automobiles road trip across the Midwest. Avenatti filmed his segments for the show under house arrest for attempting to extort Nike for up to $25 million. He has since been imprisoned for defrauding Daniels, but his participation in the case was a rare point of contention between Hoffman and Leonard. While Leonard developed a personal friendship with Avenatti, Hoffman rankled at his methods, saying, I didn't think of him as a major part of our story. 25 years have passed, but John Leonard still thinks Pepsi's offer was real. From a long-tenured federal judge's perspective, it may not have seemed like a legitimate offer, but I can tell you, millions of my peers saw the commercial and thought it was an offer, he says in the docuseries. Fair or not, Leonard v. PepsiCo reaffirmed the clear-cut rule that advertisements are not ordinarily considered to be offers, and further emphasized that, in general, an advertisement cannot be considered an offer if it is taken in jest by a reasonable person. For what it's worth, maybe because lawsuits can be quite costly, perhaps even as costly as a Harrier jet, to avoid any possible confusion in the future, Pepsi's ad agency later updated the commercial to list the cost of the Harrier jet as 700 million Pepsi points and added the words, just kidding, beneath the price.